Welcome back, everyone, to Bitcoin is Hard, a podcast about Bitcoin and personal finance. Today, we've got Andrew of Galoy, and he's going to be covering what I really love is like an evergreen blog post on just kind of lessons and takeaways from Bitcoin Beach. Bitcoin Beach, when Mike Peterson from Bitcoin Beach went on Tales from the Crypt, Marty Ben's podcast, that honestly was the top podcast that I listened to that year that it came out. It really did kind of change the way that I thought about Bitcoin, because it hit me at an interesting time of I had been doing Bitcoin meetups and talking to Bitcoiners in person. And we'd been messing around with Lightning and messing around with wallets and all these things, but it was the way that kind of Bitcoin Beach was just making it happen and just going with the flow of whatever tools were available and getting it out there and using it really made me think there's no reason why the 25 of us that come to this Bitcoin meetup here in California couldn't literally do the same thing with the bar that we meet at. There's nothing technically missing anymore. And that's what sparked for me. And so when I saw this post from, obviously then the whole story has been off to the races and blown up into this big giant global thing that we know it today. But when I saw this post from Galoy that Andrew helped write, and this forward from Mike Peterson, this first sentence just really honestly really sticks out to me, where he says, "Revolutionary change is usually sparked by those that are too young and naive to understand that their undertaking is doomed to fail." Mike wasn't aware of the discussions on Twitter about medium exchange versus store value, or is Lightning ready, or kind of all of this stuff that we're open to every single day. And it was that lack of kind of being steeped in that I think definitely contributed to what happening. And so that just really struck me about this post. And I know that there's truth in this post because I've experienced the six lessons that come up here in my own life, and I've watched each of them happen here at Bitcoin meetups in the US. So I know that there's universal truth in here and evergreen truth in here. So what we're going to do today is this is my long-winded intro, but I'm going to do my best to kind of just step out of the way and really let Andrew kind of take us on the path of just what Galoy has kind of learned and what their perspective is on just kind of Bitcoin products. So that's the teed up discussion, Andrew. So super appreciate you being here, and appreciate the audience being here for listening as well.
Awesome. Thank you for the opportunity and the great intro. I too am taken aback in the most positive way by the Mike Peterson intro, and we can definitely get into that. Just as a quick intro, as you mentioned, I'm Andrew. I'm Director of Marketing at Galoy. We built the Bitcoin Beach wallet down in El Zonte in El Salvador, and we believe that Bitcoin is money. So our mission is to make it simple for communities and institutions to use Bitcoin as money. And the way that we do that is we've built an open source platform that any community or institution can use to stand up a Bitcoin community bank and offer a Lightning wallet to their members. So just a couple quick items before maybe digging into some of the deeper learnings from Bitcoin Beach. Many people see Bitcoin Beach wallet and really think it's a wallet, and I just wanted to mention that there's actually a lot surrounding the wallet that is part of the Galoy platform. Essentially, it's a community bank, and so it provides a different model to self custody versus a full custody solution, which we call shared custody, which is actually one of the lessons which we'll dive into. But the Galoy platform involves beyond just the wallet, a web tipping page where a customer of a merchant can set the invoice amount and pay, back-end API and dev tools, compliance tools, administration control. So really, there's a lot there, and maybe we can get the Galoy GitHub link up there because it is an open source platform. So it's really exciting to see the community really getting behind what we're trying to do, and really getting involved in developing the platform. And maybe lastly on there, before take a breath and kind of dive into the Bitcoin banking for communities article, is recently we have seen Bitcoin Jungle out of Costa Rica, that really, they did just what I was mentioning. They got into the open source code, forked it, and launched their own wallet, and they've been onboarding people at the ferias, the farmers markets, over the past month, and it's really inspiring. And they've been really grateful in sharing back learnings and insight from their experience. But it's just really inspiring to see a community, not asking permission to, and really, leaning into the open source nature of what we're trying to do, and replicating the circular Bitcoin economy that happened down in Bitcoin Beach. And one of the notes, maybe as a segue into the Bitcoin Banking for Communities article, I just got some feedback that they're really happy and impressed at the way that it's not just the open source platform itself, but also like we're trying to systematize learnings. So we have a Twitter space every Thursday where we're talking to people in the space about what they're trying to do in their communities, right? Bitcoin Ikasi in South Africa, Bitcoin Lake in Guatemala, and really trying to convene people, because there are communities around the world, and Brian, to your point, what you're doing in the U.S. is novel as well. We really need to get you on, but we're trying to ensure that learnings are shared across communities, because that accelerates really the adoption of everybody, right? And so the inspiration behind writing the Bitcoin Banking for Communities article was really that, which is I was new. I've been at Galoy for about 4 months now, and I was diving deep into learning some of the history, listening to Nicholas Bertet, who I see is here today, our co-founder and CEO, and the Mike Peterson podcast. Right, there's probably about 10 or 20 or 10 of each, right? So 20 podcasts featuring Mike as well as Nicholas, really. And as you start to listen to these, you start thinking and piecing together, wow, there's like 30 important lessons here that people need to know about. And we really just started hammering them out into a bit of an outline, which brought us to the guide. And so the guide is broken down into 6 lessons. When Nicholas and sort of the initial, Chris Hunter, our co-founder, and really the impetus of building the Bitcoin Beach wallet, they went down and built on the ground in the community, right? And so they were, every day learning things that you wouldn't notice if you were trying to build in, San Francisco or Austin or something like that for a community in El Zonte. They were there watching people buy pupusas and really trying to see, what broke, what was difficult. And so the guide is really a sort of a culmination of a lot of those lessons.
100%. So I texted the GitHub link over to Simon, and we'll work on getting it into the nest of the spaces for people to check out. Stay on the open source part first for a minute, and like stay on the other groups, like being able to take notes and kind of like begin to implement in their area.
Yep.
How does, because I'm intimidated by like GitHub links. Like I don't have the ability to like take the GitHub link and like begin implementing it from there, but that's because I'm not like a software engineer. So can you talk about how these communities, the like other locations that are popping up, how are they built out with like engineers that are doing that work, and like kind of call them community organizers or whatever as well? Or like how's that going?
Sure. This is something that's been interesting to watch, which is the different contexts and the different individuals sort of developing these community initiatives, right? There's more than one way to try and build a Bitcoin circular economy, and what you see in certain economies is people are in certain communities is people using really hacking together available tools, and educating people, with various, custodial Lightning wallets and, BTC Pay Server and Lightning Tipbot, and like really stringing together, available solutions to onboard people and onboard merchants to be accepting Bitcoin. In other communities, and this was the Bitcoin jungle, model. We see a team of, developers who had the skill set, the know-how, and the willingness to dive in and build with the Galoy infrastructure. Over time, we're continuing to make it simpler to implement, and I think to be more accessible and fast, to implement the infrastructure. I think that Bitcoin Jungle was that example of that. That first team that where a community had the equal part, the education and kind of like wanting to be, participating in the community, as well as the development expertise.
Because that hacking together of just available solutions is the way that like Mike started, and that was part of the funny part of, like, again, listening back to that episode with him and Marty, was the tools that he would say at times would elicit kind of like general like cringe if you were steeped in like the Bitcoin Twitter like understandings of the day, because we're so good at kind of splicing like down pros and cons of all the services, kind of just from a feature list perspective. But it was that's what was so wild and eye-opening about it, was he was saying, correct, but we're literally taking ground like in this city.
Yeah. I mean, they started out, they were using on-chain Bitcoin. They did not have, Lightning wallets. And they had a real use case, right? And this is kind of what Mike's forward gets into a bit, which is, he mentions in the beginning, in the forward, for Salvadorans that are living in poverty, the debates between digital gold and digital cash camps seem out of touch and without practical relevance, right? Like, this was, a time period where, COVID was coming through. People were needing, a way to buy food and support their families, and they began using Bitcoin as a solution. And then for the folks who haven't dug deeper into the story of Bitcoin Beach and the origin with Mike and Jorge and Chimbera, is a lot of what they're doing. I mean, they're doing community projects that are helping keep kids out of gangs and provide kids education and the ability to dream. I mean, that's what they talk about, right? Like, you talk to them and they're like, no, I want people to want to stay in El Salvador and not feel like they have to leave to build a future. I want people to dream. And so initially they were, distributing sats into the community, and then they faced this, what Mike calls the chicken and the egg problem, right? Like, you can't give people a bunch of sats without a way to offload them or trade them for something, which is what, a tweet we shared today is from September 2019. El Zonte River cleaning team got paid in Bitcoin and used it to buy papooses at Mama Rosa's papuseria. And it's like, is that the first documented like Bitcoin papusa purchase? And that was like 2 years ago. And then yesterday or this week, we have Max and Stacy and Jimmy Song and government officials from Mexico that are coming through. And I see a lot of familiar names in the space here, and I think many of us have been down there to visit, almost a Bitcoin mecca down there. And so it's an amazing story, and I feel privileged to be able to have like spent the time and gotten deep enough to be part of writing this guide.
Yeah. No, and the guide's impressive. And so, yeah, I'm down to get into it because it's like very ordered thinking, and I love the bullet points. I love the headlines. So yeah, let's take us through it.
Sure. I guess I just start by saying and just echoing that, the at the core of this, which is something that's hard to replicate, right, is the community initiative and what Mike and Jorge and Chimbera have done over time. And when we started digging in and capturing the learnings, there were some certain things that started sticking out to us. I'll skip over a little bit of the why of why Bitcoin in El Salvador. I think that's like a story that people have become familiar with or can catch up on. But we'll hop into really the need for the wallet and the opportunity that Galoy engaged in, and when Nicholas and Hunter went down there. Um, the need to have sort of that circular economy and have a tool that was easy for merchants to use, a tool that was quick and free, right? You can't wait for on-chain transactions, right? We know that Lightning is a key accelerant to making Bitcoin money. There was just such a good opportunity there, and when Nicholas Nicholas knew about the project and had been following along, but when they were trying to think about how and where can we try and build this community bank model for Bitcoin, Bitcoin Beach was a logical place to do so. And so
I guess can you expound on just what you mean by community bank? Can we do that, or should we
sure.
go through the guide? Yeah,
No, yeah.
Expound on that term for a minute.
Yeah, and there's a great article. I don't know if we can find, but from Folger Ventures, that touches on community banking and Bitcoin, like how the two are and can be related. But the idea is that in the community banking, in a community bank, funds are sort of invested by and into the community around you, right? So I know that like as Bitcoin, we talk a lot about the idea of strengthening or local community, and so the having funds locally and then being able to invest those funds in projects that benefit the local community is just a really strong prospect. And it also has to do with the custody, how the Bitcoin is custodied. And so one thing that you don't want to do in a community like El Salvador is El Zonte, is say, hey, here's this thing called Bitcoin. Here's a seed phrase, like don't lose it or you're losing all your funds, right? Like that's not a good on ramp for folks, especially living with tin roofs, tarp walls, dirt floors. There are people who cannot read, right? So there needed to be a different on ramp, right? But the model, the shared custody model that sort of Nicholas built for the Bitcoin Beach wallet enables the keys to be held in the local community. So this is like tight knit. It moves the trust, right, from like a company somewhere in the world, right, that may or may not be interrupted or disrupted by their own local governments and issues, and it moves it actually more locally into the people really surrounding you. So you're talking, family member, right? El Zonte is a pretty tight knit community of 3,000 people, and there are local people there that are holding those keys, and so it means that there's a different sort of opportunity there where when you can still of course withdraw Bitcoin, and the idea is that like this is one of the later lessons, but we believe not your keys, not your coin as well, right? Like self custody is the desired end solution for anybody holding a material amount of wealth in Bitcoin, but that is a secondary step to being able to transact digitally, right? So in El Zonte, one of the things that Chimbera and Jorge talk about is like for them, using Bitcoin gave people the opportunity to transact digitally for the first time, right? Like that's crazy.
Yes, because here in the intro, or the extended intro, it says traditional banks don't do business in the poorest communities, and I think that's another like big thing that I didn't realize like before reading this post and getting more into it. Like El Salvador was already dollarized, so like all this kind of armchair quarterbacking like on Twitter about how like yes, the dollar is the strongest of the fiats and like kind of this stuff, and like we already have, you know, digital payments that work relatively well or whatever. Like, no, you don't. Like banks charge high fees to even have digital like money.
Right. Right. Yeah, and this is the thing that has been eye-opening for me, is learning about like the different use cases around the world, right? Like, living in America, like we don't have the problems that Bitcoin and Lightning solve from as money perspective, because we have many tools. Well, we have tools across a wide spectrum, I would say, that people in places like El Zonte don't have, and there are a billion or more people who have those types of problems, which is they can't afford a bank account, because it is the banks are, it really is not, the banks aren't incentivized to do business in those communities, and they don't they're paying in cash. They're riding a bus, a couple hours to be paying bills, right? And like you're talking about like taking they with the tagline in El Zonte is El futuro está aquí, right? Which is the future is here, and it really feels like that when you're there, because these are individuals paying their electricity bills with Lightning, and like I come home and I have to like read a paper bill and figure out that like they don't even accept, I can't even go online to pay, which would be a hassle in and of itself, right? Like there are these opportunities with the Lightning wallets, especially, I mean, they're just leapfrogging way ahead of us. And I saw that this is what, Peter McCormick said when he came back, I think the first time, is he came from El Zonte, like to the US, and he's like, I feel like I've traveled backwards in time, right? It's just so fast and so efficient to be using the Lightning Network. When I visited, we had a Lightning Summit, the Adopting Bitcoin Lightning Summit in November, and we visited El Zonte, and I mean, I tipped some musicians, some street musicians, and I was like, that's the fastest way to transmit value I've ever experienced, right? Faster than reaching in a wallet and finding a one, right, or a five or something like that to send somebody a tip. I took out my phone, scanned their QR code, and bam, I sent them some sats. And so yeah, it's just extremely inspiring to see them have those tools.
So then, has your opinion on the word like bank like changed? How has that changed over time? Because like banks like have a, or I guess yeah, and from the perspective of people on the ground, I guess does their like association of the word bank like have the negative connotations that like it does here in the US, or like there's no like real pushback on this term like community banking?
That's an interesting question. I I kind of want to ask some people down there specifically about that. But the thing, from my perspective, my one of my partners at Galoy have had conversations specifically about this, which is like, what do people think when you say the word bank, and how does that
Hmm.
change as you navigate around the world, right? Like it carries an often negative connotation for many.
Hmm.
But does it need to? Like, do we need to reclaim the word bank? I think
Hmm.
I think Satoshi, did he use the word bank at some point? And like, and so that is something that we have we've wrestled with a little bit. But for me, I think that it's the like bank. The term bank has become fraught with baggage, but it doesn't need to be in the future.
Hmm.
And that, like, especially when you think about, for me, the idea of community banking, the idea of giving, whether it is a community like El Zonte or a company or, a sort of a government institution or something like this, like the ability to, have their own charter and their purpose and their ability to onboard people. Like, I just think it's just really good for Bitcoin, right? Because Bitcoin needs good on ramps, and I think that the solution that we at Galoy have produced is just an awesome on ramp for sort of that community banking model.
Hmm. Yeah. Yep. I agree. And I love the idea of just like taking back the word, like reclaiming words, because that's, and kind of keeping it focused on like the topic of product design and just like Bitcoin product. Like we're, what's happening is just an improvement on like the way that like money software was working. Like it's truly just a 10x and 100x like upgrade. And so the old words are going to just like feel like different. Like it's almost like no analogies are like almost perfect. And so I do like the idea of kind of, yeah, like being intentional about the language, but yeah, also not getting like hung up on it.
Right, right. I mean, it's really, you know, delivering the value, like solving a use case, solving a problem, right, for the community, and trying not to get too hung up on the terminology. You know, and I think that is the that is the notion of, like, you know, when thinking about a community bank versus like a quote unquote big bank, right? There's a inherent difference there, and I think it does make you ask the question, like, oh, what do you mean, right? And then you dig into almost the rabbit hole of community banking and union banks, and you start to go, oh, like it that there used to be more, and there could be again, like these banks that really do right by their community, and are a sort of a value, add value, versus maybe how people look at banks today, which is maybe extracting
Mm-hmm.
value and selling people things that they don't need, and stuff like that.
Yeah. I heard you use this term, the lightning as an accelerant for Bitcoin as money. And that's the title of lesson 2. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, the Lightning Network, you know, I think is the thing that that enables, you know, what has happened in El Zonte to take place, because you know, the Galoy thesis, which Hunter and Nicholas wrote in 2020, I think July of 2020, touched on this idea of, like, you know, people talk about Bitcoin not being able to scale, and number of transactions per second, and really, you know, they dug into this notion. The article is called "Lightning as a Retail Payment System," and dug into this notion that, you know, Bitcoin is not comparable to Visa, right? Like Bitcoin is comparable to FedWire, which is where transactions settle, right? And so, like, a lot of us don't really think about or understand, or know how the current financial system works, and so, you know, it's easy for people to, and you still see it all over the place. People saying like Bitcoin will never scale, but by enabling Lightning, which is enabling zero fee, or almost zero fee transactions, and near instantaneous, it makes the retail experience possible, right? Because if you're buying a pupusa or a coffee, you can't be waiting for, you know, confirmations and and things like that. And so, you know, adding Lightning into the mix really created the scenario where Bitcoin and Sats can be used just as daily money, just like anybody might, you know, use cash.
Mm-hmm. All right. I skipped lesson 1. I jumped you to lesson 2.
Lesson 1 is crucial, and I'll touch on it just for a minute. I mean, it's called it says, you know, education is paramount, and the insights were really interesting to me, and I've heard them from a couple of different people in a couple of different ways. But well, first of all, like the human touch and like the idea of community organization is crucial, right? So it's hard to even think about how many hours Jorge and Chimbera and the broader team of many individuals have spent, like, standing next to another person and walking them through the process of downloading an app, setting it up, and send sats back to them. And so, you know, that's crucial. You know, and it'll vary by community or audience, right? But especially in El Zonte, that was crucial. And the second point, which was the one that it was a bit of a light bulb for me, I've heard Cal Casa say this as well, his experiences in Africa, is it's more effective to show people how to use Bitcoin than to tell them about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I think as Bitcoiners, we try and figure out how far out of the rabbit hole do we need to go to help somebody like understand what we know, understand what we understand, and what people in these communities are finding out is like you actually don't need to sell them on hard money. You don't need to sell them on 21 million. You don't need to sell them, like these are all things that they will learn once they see the magic of Lightning and of of receiving sats and learning that you know that is an open protocol that you're utilizing. And so just the idea of like showing them, send somebody sats and have them send it back to you, is like the first thing. And you know, one quick story from Bitcoin Jungle, they just launched within the past month or you know a little bit longer than a month, and they launched at what are called ferias, which are farmers markets, and they've been seeing week over week more merchants are beginning to adopt or accept Bitcoin. And not only that, where they started was, hey, you can exchange your Bitcoin back into the local currency when the farmers market's over. And so for the first couple weeks, they saw, you know, a significant amount of people doing that. And like within a month, like there's already merchants who are like, no, I'm good. I'm gonna hold on to the sats, right? And so, like the mental flip that can happen from saying, I don't know what this is, I'm scared of it, to I'm hodling is pretty amazing to watch happen. And I think that part of, you know, it's exciting to be part of these or privy to these, right? Because with Bitcoin Beach, we're talking about that, you know, multi-year process and going through some of these iterations and learnings. And now you're starting to see other communities adapt and implement some learnings and really be able to accelerate really quickly in getting people on board.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing in the education, kind of we put it in the education bucket, is this notion of like seeing Bitcoin as money, and in El Zonte having a Bitcoin ATM, which by the way, like there's a Bitcoin ATM in El Zonte and there's not a regular bank ATM, which is kind of funny. Like you can get in and out of Bitcoin, but not like, you know, your bank card, and that actually helped people with the same thing that I mentioned with the ferias, right? Which is like once I see that I have this number of sats and I can actually exchange it for the local currency, I start to see it as money. And then the next step is, well, now I want the sats. I don't want the fiat, right? Right. But that is a helpful step to get people over the hump.
Yeah, I think that's the power of the like getting paid in the other currency, as well. But yeah, I remember one time, like Mike said somewhere that he just said, yeah, like people figure out how much they want to hold of each naturally, like, and it just moves in that direction. Like it doesn't require, like you said, it doesn't require the like deep economics, hours long conversations.
Right, and you know, one of the bits here is helping people plan for short-term volatility. I mean, of course, depending on when somebody gets exposed to Bitcoin, I mean, everybody goes through, you know, ups and downs within Bitcoin. But you know, what's happened in El Zonte is that, you know, people have been able to save for the first time in their lives. You know, in the past, they were not. One of the pods that blew me away was Mike mentioned people that would buy cinder blocks if they had some extra cash because maybe they were going to do a home project and they knew that the price of cinder blocks go up over time.
Wow.
And I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Right. Like talk about the like not having access. Talk about like, you know, maybe my own, you know, view being clouded by like what the real lived experience of individuals are and the additional value that Bitcoin can bring.
Yeah. The volatility thing, is one that gets I think Twitter, I think that's the hardest. That's like the hardest one to get over.
Yeah. It is. I mean, the learning process, learning
because measuring purchasing power is so hard. Like measuring purchasing power is so hard and so ambiguous that like that story of like literally using cinder blocks as a savings tool is wild. Like, and that's happening all around the world, that people are having to find like other items are being monetized because the money isn't working.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I think that like learning to deal with the volatility is something that comes with some of the research, and like the why you don't worry when with the fluctuation, right? And I mean, I think there's a few angles to it, but it is you know, it is a thing. And you know, one of the things that we mentioned in the article is that in the early days onboarding merchants for the first, you know, few weeks or something like this, um, they were providing some bumper sats,
Yeah.
right? If the price was dropping and it was, you know, worrying the merchant or putting them in a tough position, there was really a little bit of an onboarding period where they were able to learn about sort of, you know, the price movements, and so but now again it's that learning process that over time, like, people are like, no, this is how we hodl and save.
Yeah, because the volatility, has always been there. It's just by now having Bitcoin as the option, it's like being exposed in a different way. Um, and so, but yeah, I understand the part about when you're building a community, offering some sort, like the experienced Bitcoiners making the offer of some sort of backstopping, whether that's, you know,
Right.
you being willing to buy it off of them, or you being
Right.
willing to like eat a little bit more of the volatility on your side to, you know, make them like quote unquote whole for like some level of things. Like a small way that this happens at the like meetup level in the US is like, yeah, if you're tipping a bartender and, you know, it's like they want to cash out or whatever, like you still just like appreciate that they were down to like ride like for a while, and you like buy it back from them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. All right, did you cover two enough, or want to hit two some more?
I think we covered two enough. I think that, you know, the notion of Lightning as an accelerant for money. You know, you can look into some of the more details. Like there's some interesting lessons that you just might not think about, like using on chain for retail transactions creates dust, right? Like, so like you have Bitcoin Beach, which, to your point at the top of this, at the beginning of this space, you're like, you know, Mike was not steeped in any of the, like, you know, inner workings of Bitcoin or Lightning or anything. Yet he's like, yeah, we had like this dust problem where like unspent transaction outputs like become less than the cost of spending it, right? And like, because and that's one of the funny things that you know, I think Mike says a lot, which is like, we have kids in El Zonte who use the Lightning Network more than some of the, you know, the hardcore Bitcoiners, right? It's just part of daily life here, and so you know, that just speaks to that point of the Lightning Network being crucial to enable what's been transpiring in Bitcoin Beach.
Mhm. All right, lesson number 3: merchant onboarding is necessary to foster a local circular economy.
Yeah, this gets into that chicken and the egg problem I mentioned, which is if you want people to value receiving Bitcoin and getting paid in Bitcoin, they also need a place to spend that Bitcoin. And so, you know, getting to a place where merchants are A, accepting it, and B, like the next step is like wanting to accept it, right? Because, you know, you're not always going to be there to show them how to accept Bitcoin for, you know, a coffee or whatever they're selling. But, you know, there was a lot of learnings involved in watching, yeah, what was happening. So El Zonte was was a cash based economy, you know, largely unbanked. I think 70% unbanked, and so exchanging cash was the normal, the way in which people were transacting. And as you know, we're humans, we hate change, like, right? To create a new habit, it has to be, you know, however many times easier, to or better, right? And so there were certain learnings, and one of them, you know, really I'll share, is this notion of, you know, making the process require less time, attention, and clicks. Some early friction existed where, you know, you have somebody who's making food, right? and they somebody orders a pupusa, and then they say, okay, it's going to cost 50 cents. And initially, when the merchant needed to go over, get the phone, open it, unlock it, open the Lightning wallet, create an invoice, right, and share it and show it, like you're actually costing them time, right, and versus somebody leaving some change or dollars on the table, right, and so it was not easier at the beginning, which led to the solution of enabling the QR codes at the vendors, on their carts and things like this, right? And so and also to having the sort of the Galoy has a point of sale web app that all users can use, which is at ln.bitcoinbeach.com/ right Jorge V. That will pull up Jorge's page, which you can, from any Lightning wallet, create your own invoice, right? So you can say, I want to pay Jorge, and so there were multiple ways in which Nicholas and team identified ways to reduce friction. A couple others are, for those who haven't seen or used the Bitcoin Beach wallet, there's contacts, right, so that you can pay by username, as well as there's a recent contacts screen, right? So if you're in your local community and you go to a place you go to often, you can actually just click on their username and send it to them. There's also a map, like a map that has pins of merchants, and so you can just bring up the map. It's almost like like you would see on Yelp or something like this. You bring up the map, click on the vendor, and pay them that way. And so created multiple ways to make it easy to pay, and especially easy to get paid. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing was, and we touched on this a little bit previously, but just creating incentives to help people get adoption early on, right? Right, like humans don't like change. Like, give them a reason to try it, and then reduce friction so that they continue to use it and onboard it, right? Because these are all things that they're going to do often before they understand the full value of Bitcoin and Lightning.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk to so is it fair to call those like static addresses, like static Lightning addresses? Or would you call it, because my question is, how is, like, it's awesome, the Bitcoin Beach wallet, or the Bitcoin Beach wallet does this, and so each merchant has their own page where you can pay them. How is Lightning doing? Like, I've just heard this term, static Lightning addresses. Are you able to speak to the development of those at all, or like if other wallets are going to have these?
So when the Bitcoin Beach wallet was created, the static invoice was not something that was available and implemented. They actually had a sort of a custom solution to be able to bring up the invoice in the Bitcoin Beach wallet. Now we actually just added Lightning address, received to Lightning address, and static invoices. So for instance, now any user can have a static QR code. I mentioned before that there's a ln.bitcoinbeach.com/mamarosa, and you can actually go to that page and go to /print, and that would be a static invoice that any user can go to from, you can print that and put that on a counter, or a menu,
and then any wallet can read that. Like, so Strike, Blue, Wallet of Satoshi, like that's a Lightning invoice.
Yeah. So I'm gonna probably get out of my depth. So I'll talk a little bit about this, and then kind of defer to my team. I don't know if they're around, totally. but essentially the formats are evolving, right, and the ability to pay to and from, right? To send and receive from the different formats, right? So we have Lightning address, which some wallets can receive to, some wallets can send to. You have Bolt 12, which is sort of developing, right? And there's many conversations you can find on Bitcoin Twitter, sort of advocating the pros and the cons of those, and really like maybe more like the timing versus pros and cons. But what we have been doing is continuing to try and implement the best user experience and make it easy on merchants who are receiving sats and then make it easy on people that are paying. So just as an example, we've been working on developing some educational tools for merchants onboarding in Bitcoin Lake in Guatemala. And when you create say like a one-page document that a merchant could tape to their counter, you want to provide the best payment experience, right? Both for the person who's working at the merchant, make it easy for them, as well as for the person who's paying. Now, Lightning address is a really, really nice way to pay, but not all wallets can pay to Lightning address at this moment, right? So I just think that it almost feels like we're in like a period in time where some of these moments of friction are being worked through. And wallets are, wallets are doing a great job, and I love listening to the spaces that are had between some of the developers in the space that are kind of hashing through the different formats. And so, we're staying on top of it again from a development perspective, but also from the user experience perspective, because it's as much about how you design and manage appropriate expectations, right? Like, prevent people from getting to an error screen by communicating effectively about what wallet can or what invoice can be used, or I see. Yeah.
No, dude, you covered it well. Like, that was great. And I think, and that leads exactly into your point number 4 of the article, which is the user experience must be developed within the context of the community. And I think that's why, like, the Galoy, boots on the ground understanding in each of these each of these communities that are running the playbook of building the circular economy matters. And it's almost like, and then that's fine. We can come back and debate the pros and cons of each method as they should, by the showing the way. I don't even want to use the word training wheels, but that's the closest analogy that popped into my head. That still belittles too much what's happening, because it's way more than that. But it's if you want to call it a simplified solution or a hack or whatever, it's still moving Bitcoin and getting wallets downloaded. And then we can always be coming behind with cleaning up trade-offs.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that it's one of those moments where a new technology is finding its standards, and those standards are being implemented across multiple wallets, right, or multiple offerings. And I forget who I was talking to yesterday, but we were joking about the HTML5 versus Flash days, and you'd go to a pretty popular website and there'd be a blue logo on it, right? Or early social media was you can share something from Twitter to Instagram, but not from Instagram to Twitter, and there's these there's these connection points. And I think that with Lightning wallets, we're at a moment where we're really refining some of the experience to make it seamless for both the sender and the receiver, and especially when you get into the merchant or retail use case.
Yes. Dude, point number 1 of the match the community context hits home for me, because it says everyone it says don't take a strong internet connection for granted. And funny story on this, when we ran our Christmas party for OC Bitcoin Network, I didn't do this. I completely skipped this step. And the hallway that we were loading people into the dinner on did not have great internet access. I didn't check for that. And that jacked up our line. And so we were having to wave people through and just like kind of push the line out and collect payments out in the hallway. And so that's what I mean about just like I'm not just trying to be like overly like fluffy for the day and being like, oh, your post is so good. Like, no, literally, like I'm like reading these sentences and I have my own visions are like popping into my head.
Yeah, they're quite they're things I think that people can definitely relate to. Like once you see them, you might not see them until you land in that situation. But to your point, like really reading through this as you are trying to build a community on Bitcoin or onboard people to Bitcoin and get people on Lightning wallets, like it's important, and it can help, I would say, remove some of the bumps, right? Like, how do you accelerate the process of getting people on, right? Or how do you avoid, getting somebody excited about Bitcoin and then them running into a wall over and over again because they're trying to pay a Bitcoin invoice with Lightning or something like this, like, right? And so there's just a lot of things that we can learn there.
Yeah. Yep. What's another one of your favorites from this list?
Well, I thought that I'll speak to the app onboarding just for a second, because the Bitcoin Beach wallet, the one thing I didn't mention, it has a tab called Earn, and it goes through a couple quick questions, and it actually educates you about Bitcoin, and then you answer a question and you earn a couple sats. And so it does a couple things. It's friendly. First of all, it's like a friendly introduction to an app that involves money and might otherwise be scary. It makes you get exposed to the idea of at a very early sort of moment of like, okay, this is what it is, and then it puts some sats in your account. So now you have them, right? It might be 20 sats or something like this, but like you have sats in your wallet, right? And so things like app onboarding or education woven into experiences, I think, are so critical. Because again, like we might be Bitcoiners that are like this is the thing. Like we all need to know and use this. But a lot of the people in the communities that we're onboarding are so far outside. They're not thinking about Bitcoin. I mean, I guess in El Salvador these days, they are, right, because it's been made legal tender. But when you go across, South Africa, in where Bitcoin Akasi is currently onboarding merchants and people, it does take baby steps, and so that the idea of doing that within the app setting is really helpful. A couple other notes. Thinking about like payment notes, right? Like so. That was one thing that between customers and merchants being able to add notes to their transactions, was just something that was helpful to this community. And at first, they were just private to the at the user level, like to the person sending would only be the person to see it. But one of the things learned was actually no, like I want to be able to say, hey, this is great, or like thanks for the XYZ, right, and be able to deliver those notes across to the person you're sending the sats to.
Mm-hmm. Where this has come out in our podcast is I try to ask a question every episode about what's a Bitcoin feature or service, or not feature, what's a Bitcoin service or product that doesn't exist yet that you would want and would use. And one that continually comes up as we like talk about the intersection of Bitcoin and personal finance is this like personal finance, like accounting software. Just like, how there is like mint.com, there's like others that like allow you to budget. And I've heard from like business people and personal finance people that just like better accounting of just, and that's what's speaking to me on this one of just payment notes help with the record keeping.
Yeah, and then one other one, which is just like sats is the standard, right? Like I think like I'm such a believer in getting people to think in sats. But like you need both, right? Like it at almost every moment, right? And at every time, right? Because it's a gradual transition. Like when you're entering this space, like you can't think in sats. It's like it doesn't compute. And so and when you're thinking about value of like, oh, I'm going to buy this thing, like you need to really be able to do that. Like we should not be making people do the mental hurdles of trying to convert in their head, right? We just need to show them both like sats and the local currency.
So fully agree. And I think this one speaks to kind of earlier when we were talking about volatility as well. It's like when you're saying it's X amount of fiat settled in sats or delivered in sats, then you're always like, even if your business or your life is like on Bitcoin or transitioning onto Bitcoin, you're still floating up and down on the like quote unquote volatility. So especially if you're a restaurant and you're receiving payments throughout the day, like you're getting the exchange like at each of those kind of like markers. So you know what I mean? Like your ins and outs line up when you're like moving over to Bitcoin. And I think that's why people are able to kind of like generally like get used to it and kind of begin surfing on top of it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yep. All right. Lesson 5 is community custody. And we talked about that a little bit with just kind of, so expand any more on community banking. And I love this, the image of the spectrum of Bitcoin custody is good. And then for everyone, point number 6 is talking about momentum. And I'm going to have Andrew repeat kind of all the locations where like people are running the playbook, and we'll probably wrap on that. So yeah, expand on community banking if you want, or hop into momentum and kind of the other locations.
Cool. Yeah. So, I mean, we call this, shared custody or community custody, where we have a quote from Mike here from that Tales from the Crypt episode you mentioned, which is, you have to take baby steps. If you put all these hurdles in the beginning, people will never enter the ecosystem, right? And so having a solution where you're onboarding a community like Zonte and not requiring them to have their keys and learn about how important it is to never lose them, is something that the shared custody enables. And so it's a multi-sig solution where the keys are held in the local community, right? And there is there's cold storage, and then like the hot wallet that provides the nodes that provide liquidity for sort of the circular economy. And so it's an alternative, right, to having a wallet where you are where you don't have access to those funds. You really know who sort of within your community is holding those, not at the individual level, right, but at the community level. And so there's a little bit that goes in here into like the note on community banking. We touched on that. And what else do we have here? One of the things that it does here is it removes that friction from the first step. And I think that like reliably storing seed phrases, we had on our Twitter space last week, we had Bull Bitcoin team who just launched bitcoinsupport.com. And I'm gonna kind of try and paraphrase. They essentially said people overestimate the risk of theft and underestimate the risk of user error, right? So the idea of having this like this other model with shared custody really gives people it protects people from the user error, which is extremely important when you're onboarding. And then the idea is that as you're becoming more comfortable over time, and or as you're building wealth, you really should be learning about some of your self custody solutions and storing some of your value in cold storage.
Right. I love this sentence where it says every model has value so long as it's used for a fitting purpose. Because we've talked about like different stacks for different things, and that's what, as Bitcoin continues to take ground in people's personal finances, like you have different stacks of money for different things, and you don't store all your money for different things in the same style of account or same style of like this word custody, like I think is so like, I don't know, like it just holding money, like where you don't hold all your money in one place. You don't protect all your money in one place. You have different levels for different things.
Exactly. So this is a solution that is, I think, really well fit or well suited for onboarding and building that circularity in an economy around Bitcoin.
Yeah. So yeah, tell us about momentum. Tell us about the other locations, and then wrap us up with when your spaces are and the GitHub link again.
Yeah, for sure. And so the idea about sort of starting small and building momentum is just like to touch on the fact of like how much human time it can take to onboard people, right? Like, again, I'll just mention, Roman, Chimbera, and Jorge and Mike and the broader Bitcoin Beach team, who have spent just countless hours showing people how to receive sats and send sats. And so starting within a defined community, right? So like El Zonte had a defined community, right? It's 3,000 person community geographically separated from other villages. And I think that, helped, right? In Bitcoin Jungle, they've identified these ferias, these farmers markets, as a place where it's like a good place where people can learn about Bitcoin and use Bitcoin and really onboard. And so I would think about that. And sort of in the last piece, we say like considerations for starting a Bitcoin bank is like going into like, okay, well, like, where are we going to start? Like, what is our community? Is it a geographically, situated community, or is it a community that's distributed but around a topic or something like this? Like, any type of community or company or institution can go to github.com or Galoy Money on GitHub and fork the code and sort of replicate the model that Bitcoin Beach Wallet has been using.
Yeah. And replicate and like read this post and replicate the social model and community like activism modeled as well. Because my favorite part about point number 6, the momentum, is like starting with a defined geography or defined group, because I think that's what like US meetups are doing the best at like doing. It's just so great that like Orange County, San Diego, Phoenix, like Denver, Kansas City, like Miami, like Austin. There's and if I didn't like say your city or whatever, that means you are the person. Like, you're the person. If you're here right now, you are that person. And so like read this post and run the playbook, because the playbook works with 3 people, 5 people, 20 people, 3,000 people.
Right.
So yeah, love the open source like nature of the post, and it works on the code size and on the social layer side too.
Yeah, it's been so far translated into 6 languages, and I have French in my inbox, and so I'm inspired by the fact that so many people around the world have wanted to make sure that other people have access to the post. And so as you mentioned, there's a number of different communities. Bitcoin Lake in Guatemala is doing really exciting things. Bitcoin Jungle in Costa Rica, we spoke quite a bit about. Kive Claire in Democratic Republic of Congo, like, definitely worth checking out. We actually, if you go to galoy.io and sign up for the newsletter, we will be sending out a newsletter tomorrow and kind of featuring. We actually gave some sats for over the holidays, and we gave them to some different communities to really help get their efforts rolling. Bitcoin Beach Brazil, which has evolved to Praia Brazil. From a naming perspective, has a really fun and interesting story, and you can find that. So yeah, Galoy.io. Sign up for the newsletter. We're at Galoy Money on Twitter and on GitHub. And I am. You can reach out to me as well, and I can connect you to the right people with any questions or thoughts.
Love it, man. Appreciate your time today. Love what you guys are doing. Appreciate everyone being here. And yeah, just the ordered thinking and path is awesome. So encourage everyone to read this and start to do it in their area.
Appreciate the time. Thanks everybody for listening.
Hey all, this is Brian. You can reach me on Twitter at Brain Harrington. Shoot me a DM with any feedback from today's episode. This has been a Choice App production. Bitcoin is becoming centric to personal finance, and we want to help you learn how to better engage with Bitcoin financial services. None of this is financial advice and is for education and entertainment only.